He was just a janitor on an alien ship until pirates attacked. Jace walked slowly down the long, dark hallway of the alien ship Varthon. He pushed a floating cart filled with cleaning supplies. The floor was sticky again, same as always near the feeding chamber. He sighed, bent down, and started scrubbing the strange purple goo. No one said thank you. No one even looked at him, to the alien crew. He was just the human janitor, a cleaner from Earth, sent by the Federation under some old labor deal. He fixed broken pipes, cleaned blood off walls after minor fights, and emptied the trash chutes. The crew barely remembered his name. They didn't know that back on Earth, Jace had once been a soldier, a very good one. But that part of his life was over. He had come here to disappear. To live quietly, without guns, without commands, and without anyone depending on him. The Varthon was massive, a cargo hauler shaped like a flying spine. It carried fuel cells, rare metals, and sometimes living cargo too. The aliens who ran it were tall, blue-skinned, with 4 eyes and voices that sounded like drums. They were called the Zarnith, and they didn't trust humans much, but they accepted Jace because he worked hard and stayed out of trouble. That day started like any other. He had just finished fixing a broken air filter near the crew quarters. His hands were dirty and sweat rolled down his neck. He grabbed his rag and wiped his face. Then something strange happened. The lights above flickered once, then went red. A loud siren echoed through the halls. All crew were ordered to report to their stations. Jace stood still, his heart starting to beat faster. This was no drill. He looked at the nearest wall screen. It was blank. Then a robotic voice came through the speaker system. All crew, lockdown protocol initiated. Unauthorized boarding detected. Jace's eyes narrowed. Boarding? Pirates. The Varthon wasn't a warship. It had weak shields and no real weapons. It wasn't made for fighting. The crew wasn't ready, and they had never seen real combat. Jace grabbed a small spanner from his tool belt and backed away slowly. Down the hallway, he saw 3 pirates storm in through the airlock. They weren't Zarnith. They wore dark armor, their faces hidden behind red glass helmets. One carried a long rifle. The other 2 had shock rods. The crew tried to resist, but the pirates moved fast. One Zarnith officer screamed before being slammed into the wall. Others were forced to the floor. Hands behind their heads, the pirates laughed as they took over the bridge. Jace ducked behind a supply cabinet and held his breath. He felt the fear crawling up his spine. He hadn't been in a fight for years. He didn't want this life anymore, but he also couldn't ignore the panic in the air. He peeked through a crack in the cabinet and saw the pirates dragging the alien doctor by his collar. They shouted something in a language he didn't understand. The doctor begged them to stop, his voice shaking suddenly. A heavy boot kicked open the cabinet door. A pirate spotted Jace and yelled, "Another one, just a cleaner." They pulled him out and shoved him against the wall. "Lock this one in a storage room," said one of them. "He's useless." They dragged Jace down a corridor and threw him into a small supply room. The door slammed shut and locked with a loud hiss. The light inside flickered. It smelled like metal and oil. Jace sat there quietly, looking around the room, shelves lined with old tools, cleaning bots and spare parts. He let out a slow breath and closed his eyes. It was happening again, the feeling he had tried to bury. The soldier in him was waking up. He stood up, walked to the far corner, and removed a loose panel he had secretly unscrewed weeks ago. Inside was a small bag he had hidden, just in case. He opened it and smiled slightly. Inside was a compact human-made scanner, a sharp utility blade, and a set of flexible hand tools. Nothing fancy, but enough for him. He rolled his shoulders, pulled his sleeves tight, whispered to himself, "I didn't want this fight." He looked at the door and narrowed his eyes. "But now you've got me." Outside, the pirates laughed and barked orders. They didn't know what was coming. They didn't know that the man they locked away was the most dangerous one on the ship. Jace stayed silent for a moment inside the locked supply room, listening closely. He could hear the heavy steps of the pirates moving above, the metal floor creaking under their boots, muffled voices, laughter. And the occasional scream reached his ears. He leaned his head against the wall. Eyes closed, counting, thinking. There were at least 9 of them. Maybe more, and they were armed. He had no gun, no armor, just old tools and a head full of experience no one on this ship ever saw. He moved quickly, grabbing a few things from the shelf, an old plasma cutter, almost dead but still sparking, a coiled wire with magnetic ends, and a mini torch used for pipe repairs. He tore a strip of cloth from his own jumpsuit and tied it around his wrist. Wrapping the torch to it, he slid the utility blade into his belt and took the scanner, which blinked softly in his hand. He climbed up onto a crate and opened the ceiling panel. The narrow maintenance shaft was dusty, barely wide enough to crawl through. He had used these shafts 100 times before to fix broken cables and air filters. Now he was using them to survive as he crawled through the dark tunnel. Voices echoed from the vents. The pirates were spreading out, looting, mocking the crew. They didn't expect resistance, especially not from a human janitor. That was their first mistake. Jace reached a control hub and peeked through the vent. Below him were 2 pirates standing near the security terminal. They were arguing over who should guard the prisoners. The Zarnith crew sat on the floor, hands behind their heads. Guarded by a 3rd pirate with a rifle, Jace quietly removed the vent cover and dropped the magnetic wire, letting it dangle just behind the 3rd pirate. A quick spark, a zap of energy, and the rifle slipped from his hands as the magnet hit the metal frame. The pirate turned in confusion, but Jace was already dropping from the ceiling. He landed hard, kicked the rifle away, and swung the old plasma cutter straight into the guards. "Helmet!" the pirates shouted in surprise. But Jace rolled behind a pillar before they could shoot. The cutter hit one of the nearby pipes. Releasing a burst of hot steam, smoke filled the room. Alarms started again. The crew ducked. The pirates fired wildly, and Jace vanished into the shadows. No one knew what had just happened, but one thing was clear. Now someone was fighting back. Jace crawled back into the shaft and moved fast. He needed a map, a plan, and maybe a few surprises. There was an old drone bay near the engine deck, long abandoned and dusty. He had cleaned it once and remembered the access code. When he reached it, the lights flickered as he entered. The drone maintenance panel blinked red, but one unit was still functional. A small rolling bot used to check pipe leaks, fitted with a basic laser tool. He linked it to his scanner and typed in a new command. As the drone rolled out into the hallway, Jace followed behind, quiet as a shadow. The drone buzzed near a corner, and when a pirate came to check, it burst a light in his face. Blinded for a second, the pirate didn't see Jace move behind him and slammed the metal panel onto his head. The body dropped with a thud, and Jace pulled him into a side room. Hiding the evidence, every step was careful. Every breath measured. He was not rushing, not wasting energy. This was not a war. Yet, this was cleaning up the mess. He moved through the lower halls, marking doors, sabotaging locks, cutting power lines to control rooms. He didn't face them all at once. He didn't need to. He was cutting pieces from their strength, slowly, silently. By the end of that hour, 4 pirates had gone missing. The rest began to feel it. The fear. They spoke louder, stood closer, and looked over their shoulders. The janitor they had locked away had become something else. Not a soldier, not a hero, but something worse for them. A human who had nothing to lose and knew every secret corner of their stolen ship. And he was just getting started. No one had seen him, but everyone felt him. The pirates grew nervous, their boldness fading with every passing minute. They didn't talk about it, but they knew something was wrong. 3 of their men hadn't reported back, and the ship's lights kept flickering without warning. Doors were locking and unlocking on their own. Cameras were glitching. And someone was turning the ship itself against them. Jace moved through the hidden layers of the ship like smoke. He wasn't attacking head-on. He was watching. Listening, waiting. He was cleaning up the problem the only way he knew, one piece at a time. He entered the food processing deck through a floor vent. It was cold, quiet, and filled with stacked crates of dried alien rations. He found a small control panel and hacked the cooling system. In seconds, the temperature dropped even lower. Fog rising from the metal floor. Soon, the pirates would come in for food, and the frozen fog would hide him like a ghost. One pirate entered alone, stomping his boots and cursing about hunger. Jace was already behind the shelf, holding a long steel pipe he had pulled from the coolant system. The pirate didn't have time to react. A silent swing, a crack, and he dropped like a stone. Jace dragged the body into the freezer and locked it behind a panel door. Now it was 4. The fear was growing faster than his footsteps. Elsewhere on the ship, the remaining pirates gathered, speaking in low voices. They scanned hallways and set up makeshift traps. But nothing worked. Their systems were being overridden. Their weapons jammed at random. Their radios picked up strange static. And sometimes, just for a second, they heard music. Earth music, soft and haunting. It was Jace's playlist, playing through their private comms like a whisper. One pirate threw his headset down in panic, shouting, "He's in our ears now, Jace." Didn't want to kill them all, but they had already hurt the crew, and they wouldn't stop. He needed to break them, to make them run. So he started using their fear. He left the body of the 5th pirate tied to a chair in the main hallway. Eyes wide open, helmet removed, on his chest. He had written something using engine grease. "You should have left me alone." The captain of the pirates, a tall alien in dark red armor, slammed his fist on the wall. "Find him now," he growled. "He's just a human janitor." But no one moved. Even his own men were scared to walk alone. Meanwhile, Jace had reached the power relay center. He used the tools he carried every day. Tools no one respected: wires, clamps, screwdrivers. He began redirecting energy to certain parts of the ship and shutting it down in others. Lights flickered, then died, and the only light left was from emergency glow lines along the floor. It made the ship feel like a tomb. Then came the voices, Jace's voice, recorded and distorted. Playing through the halls, not shouting, not threatening, just calm. "You boarded the wrong ship," it said. "You locked the wrong man away. I cleaned the dirt, and right now, you're the mess." The pirates split into pairs, afraid to move alone, but it didn't matter. Jace was always watching from somewhere above or below. He knew which vents led to which chambers, which pipes rattled before a system failed. This ship had been his home for 2 years. He had cleaned every bolt, fixed every cable, learned every crack in its walls, and now it was his weapon. He didn't need to shoot. He didn't need armor. He just needed time, and he was getting it. One more pirate vanished near the waste disposal unit, pulled into a dark maintenance hatch. The others didn't even look for him. They were too busy watching the shadows in just one night. A man no one noticed became the only thing the pirates feared. They didn't know his name. They only knew he was human, and he was coming for them. Captain Jarak lay on the floor of the medbay. One of his arms burned, and his breathing shallow. The med drones were offline, systems frozen since the pirates shut down half the ship. His blue skin had gone pale. His 4 eyes blinked slowly, searching the room like a fading fire. No one had come to help him, not his crew, not the Federation. He thought this was how it would end. Then he heard something move, a soft hiss near the broken vent. Jarak turned his head slowly, expecting another pirator death, but it wasn't. From the shadows, a figure stepped out, face smeared with dust, clothes torn, eyes sharp. It was the human. The janitor? Jace said nothing at first. He walked over, looked at the captain's injuries, and pulled a small med spray from his pouch. He knelt beside Girak and applied it, pressing firmly into the burn. The captain gasped, then hissed in pain. "You," he said, confused. "You were taken, locked me in a closet." Jace replied without looking up. "Wasn't a very good one, Girak." Coughed, trying to sit up. How are you still moving freely? I know this ship better than they do," Jace said, handing him a water capsule. "They're afraid now." Girak tried to laugh, but it turned into a groan. "A janitor," he whispered, cleaning up. Pirate's Jace gave a small smile. Then his face turned serious. "I need access to the engine control room," he said. "And to your bridge-level override codes?" The captain hesitated, blinking slowly. "You can't fight them alone." He said, "I'm not," Jace replied. "I'm fighting with the ship itself." Girak looked at him like he was seeing him for the first time. He reached into his belt and pulled a chipped command crystal. "Take it," he said. "This gives you level 3 override authority, Jace." Took it and slid it into his wristband, watching as new pathways lit up on his scanner. As he stood, Girak said softly, "Why are you helping us, human?" Jace paused at the doorway, then looked back. "Because this is my ship too." He said, "I may mop floors, but I still live here." He disappeared into the dark hallway, footsteps silent, with the command crystal. Jace was no longer just a threat hiding in the vents. He was now tied directly into the ship's brain. He opened sealed doors remotely, triggered minor alarms to distract the pirates. He rerouted power from weapons to lighting so they couldn't see. He even shut off the gravity in one section, causing 2 pirates to float helplessly while trying to reload. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about control. And Jace was taking it back. Inch by inch, the pirates started turning on each other. One accused another of disabling his rifle. Another shouted about hearing footsteps in the walls. They were cracking. Their leader growing more furious with every passing minute. And still, they had no face to blame, no enemy to shoot. Only the feeling that something terrible was hunting them from within. Jace returned to the maintenance bay, where he had stored a few extra surprises. He built a timed power surge trap using nothing more than spare wires, an old panel switch, and a circuit inverter. He placed it near the main communication terminal where the pirates tried to call for backup. The moment their leader pressed the button, the trap blew out the console with a loud crack, sending sparks flying. A voice echoed through the broken speakers a moment later. Not the Federation, not the Zarnath. It was Jace's voice. "Try again," he said calmly. "See what happens." Panic spread fast now. Some pirates demanded to leave immediately. Others insisted they hold the bridge, but it was already too late. The crew was injured, but alive. And they had begun to whisper too, not about their captain, not about reinforcements. They whispered about the human. The one they had ignored, mocked, and overlooked. The one walking through the fire for them. Without being asked, and deep inside the ship, Jace kept moving. He wasn't done yet. Not until the last pirate fell. Not until every broken thing was scrubbed clean again. The ship had gone quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that made every breath feel louder. The kind of silence just before a storm. Jace stood in the old observation deck. Watching the stars blur through the reinforced glass, his eyes were steady, his hands covered in dust. He had set the trap, and now he waited. He knew the pirates were desperate now. They had lost 5 of their crew. Their communications were fried, and their confidence was melting fast. But desperate people make mistakes. Jace was counting on that. He had rerouted the ship's internal map. So what used to lead to the cargo bay now opened into dead-end maintenance tunnels. He left emergency lights flashing in one section, blinking a false red warning. The pirates took the bait, following the lights like moths, thinking it was their chance to access the ship's engines. They reached a large steel door, locked, open just a crack. Behind it, a dim blue glow pulsed, and the air smelled like coolant. One of the pirates grinned. He's running out of places to hide. They stepped inside, one after another, weapons raised, vision focused forward. As soon as the last one entered, the door slammed shut. With a hiss, Jace stood above, in the service crawl space. Hand on the control pad, he pressed a button. And suddenly the floor shifted beneath them. Gases released from hidden pipes, steam poured down from the ceiling, and the walls began to heat slowly, making the metal scream. Inside, the pirates yelled, shooting at the walls, calling out. But there was no enemy to see, only a voice came. Through the intercom, low and calm. "You walked into the wrong room," Jace said. "You thought this was the engine bay, but it's just a waste recycling unit, upgraded with a few surprises." They banged on the walls, fired at the cameras. But the room just got hotter. One of them collapsed from the heat. Another screamed as sparks fell from above. Jace didn't enjoy it, but he didn't stop it either. He waited 2 minutes, then released the lock and let the gas clear. Only one of them crawled out, coughing and half-conscious. Jace didn't need to finish him, the fear would do the rest. He left a message in red chalk on the wall just outside the trap room. "This is my ship now." It wasn't just a threat. It was a fact. Back on the bridge, the pirate captain was losing control. His crew was whispering when they thought he couldn't hear. They looked toward the exits more often than they looked toward him. He slammed his fist on the command screen and shouted, "He's just a janitor," but no one replied. They had all seen what Jace could do with just wires and shadows. Now the captain knew he had to make a move, fast. Before the rest of his men broke completely, he decided to flush Jace out, set a fake signal, a cry for help, using the only system still barely functional. He programmed a broadcast to sound like a captured crew member begging for rescue. He played it on loop through the medbay speakers, hoping Jace would take the bait. But Jace wasn't listening with his ears anymore. He had already traced the signal back to the source. He knew it was fake, so he turned it against them instead. Of going to the medbay, Jace cut power to every room except the bridge. Then, through the intercom, he spoke just 3 words, "I see you." The bridge lights flickered, and sparks flew from the floor panel. The pirates jumped to their feet, guns drawn, spinning around in panic. One of them fired wildly into the darkness, but nothing was there. Jace was already gone. What they didn't know was that the vents above them had been laced with micro-drones Jace repaired 2 days ago. Tiny eyes that watched and recorded everything. Now, every movement, every word, every weakness was his to study, and he wasn't watching them for fun. He was studying them like pests before extermination. The pirate captain didn't sleep that night, not because of guilt. He didn't know what guilt was, but because the lights on the bridge wouldn't stop flickering, and every few minutes, the sound of footsteps echoed through the walls, soft, slow, steady footsteps that never came from the same direction twice. It was enough to make even a killer feel watched. He barked orders, ordered system scans, slammed his fists on frozen consoles. Still nothing worked. Still no sign of the janitor, only silence. And shadows that moved when no one was looking. Elsewhere in the ship, Jace crouched near a ventilation fan. Watching the feed from his hidden drones, he saw the fear in their faces, the captain's. Anger turning into paranoia. He studied their movement patterns, their habits, even how they breathed under stress. This wasn't just survival anymore. It had become precision. He opened an old drawer near the coolant tanks and pulled out a small plastic tag, his own. From when he first joined the ship, it still said Janitorial Level 1 Access Human Laborer. He held it between his fingers, looked at it for a long moment, then snapped it in half and let the pieces fall. He was done being overlooked. Done being underestimated. Back in the bridge chamber, two pirates argued loudly. One wanted to retreat, said they should cut their losses and escape in the dropship. The other refused to leave without finishing the job. They didn't know Jace had already disabled the dropship engines the night before. Suddenly, the entire bridge shifted, a deep grinding sound coming from under their feet. One of them screamed as the floor panels dropped an inch lower, then locked in place again. They thought it was the ship breaking apart, but it wasn't. Jace had triggered a false gravity fault, a trick he learned from years of fixing unstable deck plates. Just a sound, a tilt, a flicker of lights enough to make trained soldiers believe. The ship was tearing itself open. The captain opened a transmission again, yelling into the system, "I know you're listening. Human, you think you're clever. You're just a coward in the walls." There was no answer. Only a high-pitched tone that made all of them cover their ears. It lasted only 3 seconds, but it was enough to short every gun's targeting chip. Now their weapons couldn't lock, couldn't aim, couldn't even blink properly. That's when the real signal came through. A video screen popped up on the main console. There was Jay standing in the cargo bay, alone, surrounded by empty crates and blinking lights. No weapon, just a rusted spanner hanging from his belt. The pirates stared in disbelief. He was just standing there, waiting. The captain shouted, "There, we've got him." They moved as a unit, rushing through the corridors, tracking the signal, weapons raised, but Jace had already moved. What they didn't know was that the cargo bay feed was on a delay by the time they got there. It would be empty. What they didn't see was Jace stepping through the side vents and sealing the hallway doors behind them. He watched from above as the last of them were locked inside. Pounding on reinforced glass, he activated the low-mat sphere cycle, dropping the oxygen slowly, just enough to weaken them. No killing, not yet. They needed to feel what helplessness tasted like. The captain screamed at the camera, his voice cracking. "You're not a warrior," he shouted. "You're a janitor." Jace leaned into the mic, his voice calm and sharp. "I used to be," he said, "but you forced me to remember what I was before that." And for the first time since they landed, the pirate captain didn't have an answer. The Federation patrol ship arrived 2 hours after the emergency beacon finally activated. By the time they boarded the Varthon, they found it strangely quiet. No alarms, no chaos. Just the low hum of systems slowly rebooting. The crew was shaken, but alive, sitting in small groups near the med bay and cafeteria. Wrapped in emergency blankets, one officer whispered, "He saved us." When the Federation asked what happened, but when they asked who, she just pointed to the far end of the corridor. Jace sat alone on the edge of the cargo ramp, a half-broken mop in one hand, a blackened bruise under his left eye. He wasn't waiting for applause. He wasn't waiting for thanks. He was just staring into space, breathing slow, feeling like his bones had turned to iron. A young human officer stepped forward, armor still clean, voice steady. "Sir, were you part of the security detail?" he asked. Trying to make sense of the reports, Jace didn't look at him. "No," he said softly, "I was the janitor." They didn't believe it until they saw the video logs. One by one, they watched what he did, not just fighting, but moving like a ghost, using the ship itself like a weapon. The pirates were found locked inside sealed rooms, some unconscious, some begging to leave. Not one had died, but every one of them had been broken. The pirate captain sat in a makeshift cell, wrapped in thermal cuffs, refusing to speak. Until a Federation officer leaned in and asked, "What happened to your crew?" The captain didn't even look up. "He cleaned us," he said, voice hollow, like we were stains. Words spread fast. Faster than Jace wanted. Some called him a hero, others called him a myth. But Jace didn't care about stories. He just wanted to get back to work. When the Federation offered him a new rank, new gear, a security title he refused. He walked back into the maintenance bay, fixed a leaky pipe, then found a clean uniform and hung it on the hook. It still had the word janitor printed across the back. He nodded to himself and kept walking. Jirak, now fully healed, met him at the hallway near the engine room. "You saved all of us," the captain said, voice filled with respect. Jace shrugged. "I just cleaned up." Jirak smiled, the kind of smile that didn't come easy to his kind. He stepped aside, letting Jace pass. Every crew member in the hallway stood still as he walked by. No one laughed this time. No one ignored him. Some even bowed their heads slightly. He passed them all back to his storage room. He opened the door and sat down. Looking at the wall, it was quiet again. Finally, no sirens, no shouting, no running. Just silence. And Jace liked that, not because he enjoyed being alone, but because it meant the ship was clean again. He reached over, grabbed his scanner, and started working on the next repair. The same way he always did, but now when people looked at him, they didn't see a janitor. They saw the man who turned fear into strategy, who used tools instead of guns, who took back a ship from trained killers without ever stepping into the spotlight. The man who is just a janitor until the galaxy gave him no choice but to be more.